Good morning and welcome to another edition of 15 Minutes of Flame. This is Robert Phoenix. How is everybody this morning? This is my new bodyguard. Things have been so intense lately with internet censorship and the disappearance of YouTube videos and YouTubers that I had to invest in a highly trained canine to protect my flank. So that's what happens when you stir the pot a little bit. Jumps right into action here. Yeah, I know. It's okay. I'm fine. So what's happening out there? Yeah, it's Monday, and it is the 26th of February. Just 2 days away from the last month or the last 20 days of winter, and the last couple, I'd say about the last, 8 days, really unusual meteorological conditions all around the country. I mean, California went from balmy to freezing, it went from balmy to freezing here, so whatever they're doing in terms of messing with the environment, messing with the atmosphere, probably having a considerable effect over the long-term health and natural cycles of the environment. We've talked about this many times before. We talked about the death of the loop current and how everything is pretty much screwed up thanks to the last 30 years of chemtrail spraying, right? So we got probably a little bit less than that. I remember seeing my first chemtrails in 1996, 97, right around there. So we're coming up on, 22 years. Almost 22 years, I'd say, of hardcore, intense geoengineering across the planet. And it's had an effect. It has had an effect on the natural weather systems. And California is getting back into it now. They're getting back into the drought stage. They're getting back into the drought conditions that have plagued the state. About 2 years ago, where they had a massive drought. Well, it's happening again. You can look at what's going on off the coast of California and that front, these fronts that want to come in and want to bring rain from the ocean, which is their natural process. What they're formed to do way out in the Pacific are being stopped dead cold in their tracks. And so what we have is this massive high pressure system in California that just sits there. It's just been sitting there. And I don't know if it's as a result of what's been going on, but clearly whatever's been happening in Alaska and the subarctic region has come crushing down into the rest of the country and made everything pretty damn cold with very unusual conditions. So you folks in California, get ready. You're going to have another season of drought on your hands. And I don't know what the answer is. I really don't. I think maybe Shungite or maybe Oregon. Maybe we could have like Oregon farms in California. You know, they had these cloud busters that people were making a few years ago. Pretty simple. You know, all you had to do was basically get a coffee can and fill it with, you know, the Oregon recipe, which is BBs and metal filings and, you know, all that stuff that is part of the Oregon mix and resin. And then in that can or bucket or whatever you're using, you'd put copper tubing inside the bucket or inside the can, and based on the copper and the Oregon and the resin, what you would have is you have a cloud buster. So if they'd spray chemtrails over your place, that it would dissipate the chemtrails. Now, I've never built one. I've heard that they're effective. I've also heard that nothing really happens So you may want to try it out just to see if it works. I've also heard that people who have created these things have had helicopters come over their house, because I'm sure they show up on Doppler. And it's like, okay, here we go, we've got another one. Speaking of showing up on the radar, we're going to switch the topic of the conversation here. I'm probably going to talk mostly about this subject today for the entirety of the show, although we will take a trip through the time tunnel. By the way, I was just feeling way under the weather last night and could not get onto the live stream. I actually wound up going to bed pretty early because I was pretty out of it. Anyway, we're back. We're back in fighting form. We're on our toes today. We're bobbing. We're weaving. That's right. So, very quickly, let's get some updates as to what's happened in or around the Parkland event. So, I'm going to try to find a story here which is really important, and it gets into the March 24th march that's taking place in Washington, D.C. This is a pretty extensive article here. Of course, it's by Yoichi Shimatsu. And again, I don't agree with everything he writes, but I would say that he's probably got one of the better handles on information. So, again, this is a very long piece, and I'm going to try to skip in and read certain parts of it that are going to be pertinent. I probably won't read the whole thing. But what we want to do is we want to take apart the March for Our Lives and who's behind it. Okay? So this is, again, from Yoichi Shimatsu. And this piece came out 3 days ago. Here we go. The March for Our Lives, scheduled for March 24th, is being promoted by the manipulative media as a youth initiative by 5 Parkland school survivors, led by the son of Kevin Hogg, who is one of James Comey's FBI agents. In fact, the actual permit holder for the upcoming Washington, D.C. Rally for Gun Control is not the Parkland students, but instead Everytown for Gun Safety, a controversial lobby group notorious for its inflated estimates of gun-related violence. In the wake of the Sandy Hook Elementary School incident, Everytown was founded by urban mayors allied with Mike Bloomberg, former boss of New York City and millionaire publisher of Bloomberg Business News. His list of advisory board members reads like an all-star list of CIA spy chiefs, warmongers, and agents provocateurs. What does prohibiting gun sales have to do with the murderous career of a war criminal like Admiral Mike Mullen, former head of the Joint Chiefs who launched the Afghan and Iraq wars on false pretext for George W. Bush? The answer is simple: to make it easier to impose a militarist regime on Americans like the pedophile regime installed in Kabul, Afghanistan. Every town in the USA lost sons and brothers thanks to Bloomberg's advisors, notably retired Oklahoma Senator David Boren, former head of the Senate Intelligence Committee and mentor of CIA Director George Tenet, who plotted the NATO interventions in the Balkans, the invasion of Afghanistan, and then rigged the Powell report to start the Second Gulf War. Of course, that's Colin Powell and the rods and the cake from Niger, and that's what kicked it all off. So David Bourne's on the advisory board, Michael Bloomberg. We have Mike Mullen. Closer to home on that same advisory board, there's retired ATF official Dave Chipman, who was just involved in the cover-up of the Las Vegas Harvest Festival massacre, and Chris McDonald, who notoriously posed for a professional photographer's grief portrait at Sandy Hook School, the sort of publicity stunt that convinces people about crisis actors. Not being one of those gullible believers, this is where you get editorializes, I try to focus instead on the reality of merciless human butchery, as gut-wrenching as that may be. See, I don't always agree with Mr. Shimatsu, but he has good research. So let's get into this a little bit deeper here. So again, I'm going to be crossing some political lines. It may make some of you uncomfortable, but in order to understand the truth, we have to confront the uncomfortable nature inside of ourselves and the politically incorrect zones, and we have to cross lines sometimes. And because we have to understand and deconstruct what's taking place and who the players are, and to do it unflinchingly is something that is, I think, of vital importance. Further verifying a Zionist role in the Parkland School Commando strikes, see parts 1, 2, and 3 of the series. 2 of the Everytown advisors are linked up with the Special Weapons Program of the Israeli Defense Force, the IDF. Eli Broad, founder of his namesake institute, involved in biowarfare research on Ebola in West Africa, and Qualcomm boss Irwin Jacobs, who funds Technion, the Israeli Institute of Technology, which created and developed the IDF cyber warfare program. As discussed below, the IDF cyber warfare program is yet another Israeli component involved in the Parkland false flag operation, specifically responsible for jamming the Broward County Police radio and hijacking Parkland School's video monitoring security system with the insertion of fake video clips similar to the video capture methods shown in the casino robbery in Ocean's 11, starring, drumroll please, George Clooney. The role of Kevin Hogg in the electronic warfare operation against the police rescue team is also exposed here. Now, we talked about Kevin Hogg last week. He's David Hogg's father. He works for a company called Cubic Communication, and Shimatsu is going to get into this. So let's keep going here. Other Obama Clinton cronies on the Everytown board include Tom Barrett, the Milwaukee mayor who played a key role in advocating the 2008 bailout for Wall Street, and Philadelphia Mayor Michael Nutter, founder of the Philly Rising militant group with funds from George Soros in allegiance or alliance with Black Lives Matter. Here we go. Here comes the George Clooney connection. In less than a week after the Parkland school attack, George Clueless Clooney was the first Hollywood, California, not Florida, celebrity to donate $500,000 to the GoFundMe account of the March of Our Lives, or March for Our Lives, protest movement, which was set up by student hustlers Cameron Kasky and David Hogg. The latter's father, Kevin Hogg, has a spooky record with the FBI, indicating March for Our Lives is not a charity for wound victims, but instead a cold, calculated political move for Daddy Hogg's superiors at the FBI, Justice, and CIA. A former USAF pilot, Kevin Hogg, was the FBI official at LAX who released the mysterious Nigerian-American storyteller Olaji Oluwasun Noibi in 2012 after he illegally boarded Virgin Airlines without a proper ticket or passport, apparently on a journey eventually headed toward Africa. After his arrest, Noibi pretended to be an actor, mimicking the life of Jesus. But on his booking at a police station, he was wearing a black Islamic skull cap, indicating affiliation with Boko Haram. Comey-appointed agent Kevin Hogg let him slip off the hook for a second surreptitious attempt at evading exit procedures to escape the country, apparently for plausible deniability. Nearly succeeding on his first try, Noibi was caught only because of the vigilance of a stewardess. Obama's pro-Muslim policy under which ISIS was created is rife with these sorts of unregistered Islamist passengers, state-sponsored terrorists departing from Western airports into insurgency-plagued regions, like the pair who died in the explosion at a Belgian airport. It gets into George Clooney here a little bit, but I really want to go into the Kevin Hogg piece. Let me just find this. Here we go. This is what I want to get to. This is kind of the meat of this. The electronic warfare used for the exfiltration phase of Operation Parkland had to be precisely coordinated with the movements of 3 assailants and their forward observer, who must have used a different frequency with communications to their headquarters. Not surprising, the former Navy flyer aboard a carrier, Kevin Ralph Hogg, has employed at Cubic Simulation Systems in nearby Pompano Beach, which develops programs and graphics for military training and operations. Under DoD contracts, Cubic divides its various ops planning sections into different regions of the country. Cubic's Pompano staff, where the father of Parkland student David Hogg works, focuses on joint services, commando operations, such as hostage rescue or strikes on terrorist homes, using cyber tech developed by the IDF Cyber Warfare Division. For example, this is a DoD procurement order for the Cubic Regional Office in Orlando. Cubic Simulation Systems, Inc., Orlando, Florida, is being awarded $19,930,555 modification P0002 to a previously award firm fixed price for military sales FMS contract W900KK13C0010 for the procurement of Israeli Defense Forces Engagement Skills Trainer 2000 plus systems and related services. Therefore, the obvious conclusion is that, far from being a victim, David Hogg was one of the forward observers of the joint Israeli-CIA death squad sent to Parkland, ensuring that sufficient numbers of his classmates were killed. The faker should be arrested and put under extreme interrogation, along with his father, to confess their assigned roles in the Soros-style psyop called March for Our Lives. Both father and son suffer from degenerative nerve disorders associated with electromagnetic warfare. So never think there isn't divine justice. That's a really interesting statement. Now, I haven't seen a lot of Kevin Hogg, but David Hogg looks highly unusual. I mean, if you look at him, he's got that huge head, that pointy chin, and then he has this very underdeveloped, emaciated body with really skinny, noodle-like arms. Now, I'm not the only one who has made a connection between David Hogg and having a strange alien countenance. He looks like he could be a hybrid. To me. He's got that look and feel about him. And he even has, look, maybe he's 19 at the least. Certainly he's over 18. I'm guessing he's over 18. Some people think he's 25. Now, I don't believe he graduated from Redondo Shores High School. No, that's not the case. Did he go there? Yes, I believe he went there. But I don't think he graduated from there. That's one of the clues that are out there to throw you off. But I do believe he's older than 18. However, his intelligence and his bearing is something that is not typical of an 18, 19-year-old. Okay, it's not. Certainly not a 16 or 17-year-old. So this is why, okay, here we go. This is some more interesting stuff here. Okay, I want to read a little bit more. The grandfather, here we go. Let me just go back here. Therefore, the obvious conclusion is that far from being a victim, David Hogg was one of the forward observers of the joint Israeli-CIA death squad sent to Parkland, ensuring that sufficient numbers of his classmates were killed. The faker should be arrested and put under extreme interrogation along with his father. Okay, we talked about that, the degenerative nerve disorder. The grandfather of David Hogg was an FBI agent who became CEO of MasterCard. Now, I've looked into the grandfather, who is still alive, and he lives in California, and he has some little BS business registered in California. It's probably a front. It's a business that sells computer equipment. It's a total cutout operation. Anyway, the grandfather of David Hogg was an FBI agent who became CEO of MasterCard, but was later forced out of the company by the board of directors under a cloud of suspicion related to his authorization of illegal diversions to a powerful cabal, possibly the same secret society behind the FBI Russiagate affair. Of course, the Hogg clandestine role is all in keeping with the eye in the pyramid of the Federal Reserve Bank, just like former FBI boss Robert Mueller, a grandmaster of that subversion, Hamiltonian secret society. Now they're up to, I think they're past 1 million on their GoFundMe page for the march. And I think there are other GoFundMe accounts now associated with what's going on in Florida, in Parkland. He gets into the Caskies here, the Caskey little coffins, and Cameron Caskey and his father Jeff, and Jeff's father, who have the adoption agency called One World Adoptions, and that got shut down. Now, Cameron Caskey was the kid that took on Marco Rubio. These kids, they're not crisis actors, but they're certainly actors. They were all trained, not just in the high school, not just in Parkland, but they've also probably been trained at the community college there in the Parkland area, and also UCF, University of Central Florida. This has been sort of mapped out, plotted by other researchers and people that are kind of drilled down into this thing. And I think it's Martha Brady, who is what's her name? I think it's Martha or Catherine Brady. She's the one who runs the PR firm that these crisis activists, actors, she basically specializes in taking a crisis and changing it into something else. That's her stock and trade. So these kids are likely connected to this nexus that is taking place in Broward County and Dade and that Central Florida region. So while they may not be crisis actors, they certainly seem well prepared for the role that they're playing. And the role that they're playing are the forward observers, and they're controlling the narrative about where this is going. Because, of course, people that are trying to understand, without prejudice and without bias, are trying to understand what's going on. And there's the story of Colton Hab, who's a kid that went to Parkland. He did not go to the CNN town hall forum. He's on the record. CNN wanted to give him talking points. CNN wanted him to ask certain questions that they had prepared. And he saw that he was being manipulated, so he didn't want any part of it. Then there's this young Jalen Martin kid who's been showing up on Alex Jones, and he went to Parkland, and he's got a very different story, and CNN won't touch him. So what we're seeing here is we're seeing the narrative being controlled by 4 kids. 4 kids. We have Cameron Caskey, we have David Hogg, Emma Gonzalez, and then the blonde girl who wears the glasses. I don't know her name, but she's part of that 4. Now, Shimatsu is on the record that kids died. Okay, until we can actually, without any kind of what's the word I'm looking for, discrepancies, determine that nobody died. It's probably a really good thing to embrace the fact that kids were killed. Okay, it's probably a really good thing until we can determine that that's not the case at all. And that might be the case. We may find that out. And we also may find out that it's not the case. So I think it's better to err on the side of tragedy in this moment, only because it's probably the proper thing to do. But there are discrepancies involved. There are some unusual anomalies, 2 of which I'll go over right here with you. Scott Beagle, who apparently was one of the people that perished during the shooting. Well, Scott had a whole different address set up in New York City. And apparently Scott is alive and well, and now his name has been scrubbed from the victims list. So he started off. He was one of the heroes. He was a hero teacher who perished, but because the internet still has some degree of power, we can get into researching where people are, where they're from, and look at things like property and employment. Yeah, it's available. It's out there. We can determine these things. So there's an anomaly with Scott Beagle. Another anomaly with Aaron Feist. I talked about Aaron Feist before. I went to Aaron Feist's Facebook page right after the event happened, and he was a gun freak. He was a total gun freak. And not just any kind of gun freak. I mean, he was into these large caliber belt-fed machine guns. That's what he was into. He was also very into being able to carry weapons as a teacher on school, proudly displaying a sign in an Oklahoma school district that basically says, you come onto this campus, or you pass this sign, you better beware, because we're packing and you're taking your life in your hands if you decide to do something crazy or untowards our kids, our school, or institution. So he was promoting carrying guns on campus. He was promoting big caliber weapons, huge. He was now. Clearly, he had some very strong Zionist leanings, and you can look at it on his Facebook page if it's still up. I'm not even. And by the way, those postings started 2016 and go backwards. So there's a whole almost 2 years worth of non-Aaron Feist posts. Now, I'm going to be on a show, kind of a roundtable tomorrow night with Randy Moggins and Emily Moyer and a young woman by the name of Jenny Moonstone, who happens to be from Parkland. And we're going to kind of get down into this. Now, one of the things that was kind of sealing the deal for Jenny was the fact that she knows the brother of Aaron Feist. And Aaron Feist had a funeral the other day. Well, now there are pictures on the internet, that dastardly old internet, where there's a guy at this funeral that looks a lot like Aaron Feist. Okay, now this is interesting. You only see the back part of him, but you do see this almost Santa-like beard and the girth of the body. Aaron Feist was a large man with a bald head and a big beard. And looking at him from behind, in these photos, one could make a case that, well, maybe this is him, that he's viewing and witnessing his own funeral. Possibly. It's a possibility. So there are anomalies that are, again, showing up here. And of course, the one of the more unintentionally funny anomalies is the father of, what's her name, Jenny Pollock or Rachel Pollock, who was at Trump's roundtable. I wish I had time to cue this thing up, because it is a 10 on the unintentionally funny scale. So he's there, and he's talking about burying his daughter. And I'm sorry if this sounds offensive, but he can't even remember where he buried his daughter. And he talks like a mobster from Providence, Rhode Island. Again, the unintentional humor on that thing is off the charts. And he says, I buried him, back there, the Jewish cemetery, the King David. It's crazy. This guy is like, what? And if you just buried your daughter, I guess some outrage would be involved, but at what point do these people show actual real grief? I mean, look at the automatons that they have controlling the narrative in these kids. Where's the real grief? All there is this, it's outrage. Because outrage and anger can be manufactured. It's not that hard. All you have to do is pick up an event in your head, in your history that pisses you off. And then you anchor to that event, and then you can tap into the emotional field of that event. It's not that difficult. It's not that difficult. If you've got an open wound somewhere in your biocircuitry, you can tap into this stuff. And then just channel it. But try to channel grief. That's a much harder, much more difficult emotion to channel. Because first of all, you'd have to have experienced something in your life that is extremely sad. Which means that you'd have to have emotions. And there's a little, asterisk here about emotions and people who have them and people who don't have them. And what I'm seeing is I'm seeing a group of people, to be quite honest with you, that don't have a lot of emotion. They have one emotion that they can channel, and that's anger or outrage. And that's about it. It's a one-note symphony of emotional display or lack thereof. Another interesting anomaly now is taking place with Scott Israel, who's a piece of work. Okay, so Scott Israel had to fire Scott Peterson. Remember Scott Peterson, Lacey Peterson's husband, the guy who was a cold-blooded, stone-cold killer who killed his pregnant wife and nearly got away with it. An interesting little factoid that some of you out there might have seen before is there's a Sylvester Stallone movie. I think it's Schwarzenegger. I think it's called The Running Man, if I'm not mistaken. Is it The Running Man? It's not The Running Man. No, it's the movie where he goes. No, it is Stallone, and he's a cop who goes to the future. He's flash frozen, and he's a cop that goes to the future, and he takes on Wesley Snipes, who is a villain who's also flash frozen and reanimated for the future. Well, he reanimates a rogues gallery of criminals from the past, and one of the criminals who gets reanimated is a guy by the name of Scott Peterson. I forget the name of the movie. Some of you, it's a Stallone film. I'm sure somebody in the chat room could come up with that. In fact, I could probably look it up right now. But I'm kind of in a flow, or at least I'm trying to get there. Anyway, Scott Israel is now being assailed quite publicly, and some people believe this is part of the role here, part of the next phase of Parkland. And the next phase of Parkland is going to be the civil suits, where it's going to be some of the parents that are involved, or there will be legal entities that are representing the parents. They could be watchdog groups. They could be third-party nonprofits. Now, this is setting up the next phase where they're going to go in and they're going to sue. They're going to sue Broward County Sheriff's Department. They're going to sue the school. They're going to sue the state. They'll probably sue the NRA. Anybody they get their hands on, the suits are going to come. And there's going to be a huge transference of money. We're talking upwards of hundreds of millions of dollars. This is going to be the next phase of this, and it's going to be mostly taxpayer dollars. They're going to be basically absconded with. So this is why they're setting up the narrative with Scott Israel as being deficient in his leadership. But it's fascinating. You can find it's about a 90-second interrogation from Jake Tapper with Scott Israel. And Scott Israel has this really weird mouth motion. And even if I played the clip, you have to see it to believe it. I don't know if you spent any significant time watching reptile videos, and I'm not talking about geckos or iguanas. I'm talking about people going into full-on reptilian phase on YouTube. Those videos were like all the rage about 3 or 4 years ago, 5 years ago, maybe longer. And you'd watch these people grow like 2 sets of teeth and have their eyes phase out. It is interesting watching for a few days. kind of compelling in its own way, right? Well, Scott Israel does these tongue moves while he's being interrogated by Jake Tapper that are classic Reptilian 101, I swear. I mean, you just watch the guy, and he's like 2 seconds away from going into full-on shapeshift mode. So he's under some heat now, and it's not just with Scott Peterson, who was the security guard there, was told to stand down. There were EMTs that were told to stand down. This is from a website called twitchy.com. Looks like it's on the right side of things. Right in quotes. So I'm just going to read a little bit of this to you. This is incredible. We already know that not one, but 4 Broward County Sheriff's Office deputies took up positions outside Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School rather than enter the school and engage the shooter. This is true. Now Brian Enton of WSVN in Miami has spoken to an emergency medical responder who's one of the first on the scene and spoke on condition of anonymity. Okay, this is a bit of a slippery slope because there's anonymity involved here. I'm just going to read this to you. Everything that was trained on mass casualty events say they did the wrong thing. You don't wait for the scene to be cleared. You go in immediately, armed, retrieve the victims. You can't leave the victims laying there. We were asking to go in, asking the scene commander to go in. Why are we all standing around? Why are we not having patients to treat? Why are we not going into the building and retrieving these kids? The response every time was law enforcement did not clear the scene and would not allow medical personnel in. I would hypothesize I could have saved lives. I can't say for sure. I would have risked my life to go in. I was eager to. I was frustrated the entire time I was there. Rapid evacuation of the wounded. All they had to do was drag them out of the building, and we could have started medical care. I think they made the decision they thought was right at the time, but I don't think it was the right one. They should have been more aggressive about getting the victims out. Can't say for sure if the people were dead inside or if they could have been helped. One victim he saw didn't get out to an ambulance for at least 45 minutes. So there you go. There's a new little light here being shown on the event, which is the fact that they were in there for a long time. And we heard this about Las Vegas as well, that the EMTs were very slow in responding, especially to what's been described as the killing field, just outside of the concert area where that Harvest Festival took place. Speaking of harvest, now is the time when YouTube and Google and Twitter, but mostly YouTube, is harvesting accounts for showing or exploring an opinion that is different than the mainstream and quote-unquote commonly held view about what took place in Parkland. And there are YouTube accounts that are getting shut down right and left. They're getting strikes against them. You get more than one strike. I think you get to 3 strikes and you can't live stream for a month or something like that. So we talked about the Richie Allen show on Friday, if I'm not mistaken. I think we brought that up, or at least I did. Richie Allen was taken down, completely taken down. Another copyright claim. Okay. Richie Allen was completely taken down. All right, pulled out, done, gone. I don't know if he'll be able to get back on YouTube, but there's now an exodus taking place. And people are moving over to DTube and BitChute. These are the 2 new providers. If you haven't gone over there and found them, you may want to check them out. The interesting thing about DTube is that it's in the blockchain. So it literally can't be hacked. There is a monetization component to DTube. I haven't placed anything over there. Somebody's putting my videos on DTube though. I think I have some on BitChute, but I've got videos showing up on DTube. And I guess I'm okay with it. I just don't, I wonder if somebody's actually monetizing my videos over, because I've seen my videos over on YouTube. Anyway, there's an exodus now taking place. Because what we're seeing is the creep of the police state. This is the slow, inexorable creep of the police state. And we've talked about this. I talked about this last week. I talked about it literally the day, I talked about it last Sunday night. I talked about it on Monday. It was a big part of what I was digging into for the last 5 days, is that there are going to be a number of new normals coming in the wake of this event. They're on their way. And part of the new normal is censorship, internet censorship, in a very significant fashion. Now, according to Alex Jones, again, this is Alex Jones, and I don't disbelieve Alex on this one major point, is that CNN now is going directly after Alex Jones. Now, what's interesting is the Time Warner connection with CNN, because theoretically Time Warner has been behind Alex Jones at certain points of his InfoWars existence. And that's a fact, Jack. Time Warner owns Austin Public Access Television that launched Alex Jones here in Austin, Texas. So there is a pretty significant Time Warner, now Spectrum, connection with Alex Jones. Now, CNN is also connected to Time Warner, if I'm not mistaken. Anyway, they're going after InfoWars, and they're trying to shut InfoWars down from YouTube, claiming that Alex Jones is bullying and harassing the Parkland kids. So what's happened is that, and this is one of the most clever, evil, fucking genius moves that this side has done, is that they're now using kids as human shields. Because the kids are theoretically unassailable. They're unassailable. You cannot speak out against a kid, because if you do, well, you're bullying them. You're harassing them. But that's beside the point. David Hogg, I'm pretty sure David Hogg is 18 years old. He's not a kid. You know, and these people are morons. I'm sorry. Scott Israel's a moron. You know, he's on there, pandering to America, pounding his chest that an 18-year-old should never, ever, ever be able to have a weapon. Well, Scott, 18-year-olds join the Army, and they have weapons. Are you going to disqualify 18-year-olds from joining the Army? Okay, so who can join the Army now? 19-year-olds, 20-year-olds, 21-year-olds? Look, there's a deep history of guns in this country. You go back to the 1950s, they had gun clubs, everybody had guns, they shot, and we didn't have this epidemic of shootings that took place during the 1950s. It changed in the 60s when we had the shooter at UT who was shooting from the tower. And then it all began to change a little bit. Now we have an epidemic. It's like the mumps. I have my own ideas, my own thoughts about who's behind it, and what's been taking place it's clearly it's staged, and there is an agenda behind it. And what's happening now is people are going out and buying more guns. Like, what do you think is the largest selling item in Florida right now? It's guns. So the population, or the populace, is armed to the teeth, okay? Armed to the frickin' teeth. And here's one kind of doomsday scenario, is that there is a movement to create these events so that the population becomes fully armed, locked and loaded, and is emboldened to take part in a civil war or some form of next American Revolution. At which point, they will bring in the heavy hitters and the big guns. They'll bring in the UN troops. They'll bring in the armies of other countries that are actually embedded in this country. And they're here, and they've been here for a long time. Whether they're Russians or Albanians or
the Chinese sleeper cells, they're here. They're totally here. So this would be, in essence, kind of the next battleground. And there would be a massive civil war. And as you know, the public is heavily armed, but how would they fare in an out-and-out war against really sophisticated troops who have been training, who have communications, and have this stuff game planned like you wouldn't believe? How would the public fare? I'm not sure the public would do that well. The only thing that the public would have on its side would be truth. And sometimes that is a huge advantage. Sometimes truth is the divine dispensation about who's going to carry the day. Doesn't always happen. Doesn't always happen. But I think that if you're going to defend your homeland and there's going to be a truthful relationship with that defense, then the divine right or the higher moral ground is certainly going to be on your side. It gives you a much better chance of winning. And people that are invested in defending their territory will die for what they believe in. And that's the one thing that we've seen over time. People will die for what they believe in. And that carries a lot of weight versus hired guns and the Hessians, the modern day Hessians, who don't have a, how do I say this, heartfelt connection or investment to what it is they're defending. Now, they may be fueled by some kind of hatred, but hatred can only last you so long. Like, hatred is a fuel that is spent. It's like anger. Anger is a fuel that is spent. Ultimately, it will burn itself out. But love and commitment and devotion towards an ideal or a person or a family or a property, that does not burn out. That is something that is sustainable. So when we look at the energy behind the two events, one is like a forest fire that ultimately burns out, and the other is like a million candles that are lit one after another. Does that make sense to you? So I don't know. I don't know how it would go down, but I believe that this is part of the scenario that is being cooked up so that Americans will have plenty of guns and plenty of ammunition. So when the big fight comes, they'll feel emboldened, and the Sims and the war games and kind of the AI programs that run everything have a calculus that says X amount of people are going to die. I mean, they've got this thing figured out. Trust me. This is not a haphazard operation that's taking place. It's not haphazard at all. And they have Sims, they have battle plans, they have all this stuff lined up. Now, will the United States Army step in? Will all of a sudden the QAnon white hats or the Arthur white hats come? Well, listen, here's my message. Here's my message to QAnon and Arthur and anybody else that has the connection to this, to the white hats, to the whoever they are. You better start making arrests and making them fast. Now they say, well, you'll never see these people tried in a public court. Isn't that kind of interesting? Because we're sitting around looking for proof. We're sitting around looking for proof of something. But we won't see it because they'll have some kind of military tribunal that we don't see. Well, I'm telling you right now, if you guys want to really save the day, QAnon and Arthur, tell your boys to start making these arrests so that we don't have to go to Code Red and we don't have to go into some revolutionary mode, because it's not going to end well for anybody. It may come down to that, though. I'm not sure how we get off this. It's not even a stalemate. It's kind of like this aggression, this level of aggression that keeps being instigated and perpetrated against the American people and the world. I mean, this is a world crisis. I got into it with this woman on Facebook on Saturday, and she's from Norway, And I put something on my Facebook page, and she disagreed with it, which is fine. You can disagree with me. But it was about these kids who were protesting, and not just the kids in Parkland, kids that are middle schoolers. And I was not in agreement with their protest, at least not in the way, shape, and form that it took. Okay, I was not in agreement with it. And the reason I wasn't in agreement with it is, number one, it was being politicized. Now, it's one thing if kids want to have a time where they warn these 17 kids, people, if they want to do that, fine. I don't have a problem with that. But to walk out of the school and walk down to the fence where the school is and end, and then walk back as some kind of political statement, to me, it's misinformed and it's politicized. And I said it was enabling. So I got into it with this woman on Facebook. She's from Norway. And first of all, let me just say this. No matter how bright or how precocious a 12 or 13 or 14-year-old kid is, their voice is not equal to mine. It's not. Number one, they can't vote. They don't have a vote. They don't have a say. And until they lower the voting age to, say, 16, and they might try and do this, by the way. Unless they lower that voting age, they've got to wait till they're 18. And even at the time when they're 18, are they really that informed? Are they really that informed? Do they understand? Like, I would have loved to have gone there and asked these kids about the Second Amendment or any other amendment that's part of the Constitution and just ask them if they could rattle them off. Right? I would love to have seen because they're uninformed. They're uninformed. They don't understand what's at stake. And they're being used. And they're being manipulated. So I got into it with this woman on Facebook. And that was my point. That no matter how precocious or bright, their vote does not, or their voice does not equal mine, or any other adult. And even if an adult that does not share the same opinion with that I do around the situation, it doesn't equal theirs, even if it may be the same opinion. Because that person has lived, theoretically, at the very least, they're old enough to vote. Now, sometimes kids can be really prescient and cut through the bullshit if they're not being shepherded, if they're not being led around by the nose. So anyway, I got into it with her, and I said, look, you're living in Norway, you've got a refugee problem there, you don't have guns, you've got a rape problem there, why don't you clean up your own backyard? Why don't you clean up your own backyard? And that was it. Done with her. And she's not even American. I hate to say this, but it really bothers me when people from other countries tell us how to vote and how to live our lives. Stay out of our business. Go take care of your own backyard, especially if you're in Europe, because it has turned into pretty much a human cesspool based on the amount of refugees you've had to take in and cannot be assimilated in a timely and graceful fashion, nor do they want to be assimilated. So you just turn your attention to your backyard, you take care of your business, we'll take care of our business. Boom, done. This is a really inflammatory stage in human history and in this country. And it's unfortunate that the kids have been dragged into this. And I don't believe that they have any idea what's going on and how they're being manipulated. That's just one man's opinion here. Let's see. Should we do All right. Well, today is February 26th, and I took a little time tunnel trip before the show. I can do that because I have the secret powers and the secret tones, so I can do this. And I actually traveled back into time to look at what was happening today before the show took place. And I can tell you that this is not one of the more colorful days in history, although not without a few controversial days. I'm not going to go linear. I'm going to skip around. 1993, on this day, the World Trade Center bombing. Oh, yeah, that's right. There was a World Trade Center bombing in New York City. A truck bomb parked below the North Tower of the World Trade Center explodes, killing 6 and injuring over 1,000. A lot of people remember that. That was the Ramzi Youssef event that took place in 1993. That was the first World Trade Center bombing. That happened today, February 26th, 1993. Let's see, what else? Napoleon Bonaparte, escaped from Elba on this day in 1815. How about that? What else? Oh, 1980. Egypt and Israel established full diplomatic relations. That was a good day, don't you think? Let's see, what else do we have here? Galileo Galilei, way back in 1616, was banned by the Roman Catholic Church from teaching or defending the view that the Earth orbits the Sun. I'm sure a lot of flat earthers would applaud that decision by the Catholic Church. And let's see, what else do we have here? Not a lot. This is actually a pretty lame day in history. Pretty lame day. Although this is kind of fascinating. In 1919, Wilson signed an act of Congress establishing the Grand Canyon National Park. And then 10 years later, Calvin Coolidge signed an executive order establishing a 96,000 acre Grand Teton National Park in Wyoming. So this is a pretty good day if you're a park lover. If you're a Parklands lover, you can celebrate this day, the 26th of February. Birthday-wise, I think today is Erdogan's birthday. What's his name? Princip Erdogan. Let me see if I can find his name. Yeah, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, or Erdogan. He's the 12th president of Turkey. He was born in 1954. He's a horse, born in the year of the horse. Let's see, anybody else remotely interesting born today? Oh, that beautiful loser, Tim Kaine, 70th governor of Virginia. Today's his birthday. Let's see, who else? Erykah Badu. I saw Erykah Badu. She was great. Absolutely great live show. Today is Erykah Badu's birthday. Today is the disgraced Marshall Faulk's birthday. Marshall, of course, was he's a Hall of Fame football player. And he was an announcer on the NFL Network, and he got caught in a Me Too trap. And not a trap, but there was somebody who spoke out against him. She was a stylist at the NFL Network, and apparently he hit on her, was inappropriate, and he's gone, just disappeared, gone. Today's Marshall Faulk's birthday. Let's see, what else do we have here? Pepe. Not Pele, but Pepe. This is his birthday today. He's a Brazilian footballer. Not unlike Pele. Pepe. So, relatively mundane day. Fats Domino, the great piano player, was born on this day, 1928. Along with Mitch Ryder from Detroit, 1945. Anybody else? Jackie Gleason. Jackie Gleason of the Honeymooners fame. born today as well. All right, that does it for. Oh, that's interesting. Okay, now he's not in the Honeymooners, but he was on I Love Lucy. And when I think of the Honeymooners, I think of I Love Lucy. Today is also the birthday of William Frawley, who is George, right? It's his name George from I Love Lucy, Ethel's husband. Today's William Frawley's birthday. Born way back in 1887. Wow. And he died in 1966. That guy saw some changes. When you're born in 1887, that's like cowboy. You're just coming out of the cowboy era in 1887. And by the time you get to 1966, you've got supersonic jetliners, color TV. I mean, it's kind of a cusp year, 1966. It's a big year. And even up in the early 60s, that guy saw a lot. Anybody else? No, I think that's it. Oh, Theodore Sturgeon, the science fiction writer and critic. Today's his birthday. All right, let's. Okay. That was very intense. Whenever I come back from traveling through the past, it takes me a moment or two to reassemble my atoms. All right, well, we've covered a lot of ground today. I hope I gave you something to think about as it relates to where we are, where we're headed, and the state of mind that we need to cultivate at this present point in time. And that state of mind is try to stay grounded. Do your best to stay grounded. It's really, really easy to get kind of knocked off your center. And look, you don't have to go out and fight battles. Okay, you don't. You don't have to get on your rooftop and shout at the world about what's going on, and you don't have to be a Paul Revere. It's okay. There are certain people who have it inside of their DNA to do that sort of thing. And you don't have to do it. Don't feel like you're going to be forced to, arm people or assault people or download to people information that I or other people share with you. You don't have to do it. I'm just telling you. It is a mode of self-preservation, but it's also important to be informed. So keep that in mind. That's the part of where you can stay grounded. You don't have to take on a lot of bullshit arguments with people. And you know basically who you can talk with and who you can't talk with. This is an important piece. And if you don't understand how to tell the difference, it is real simple. When you try to talk to somebody and the words aren't flowing, and you don't have an open field of communication, you should really very quickly reassess what you're sharing, and not maybe even who you're sharing with, but really what you're sharing, and then adapt, adjust accordingly. It's not everybody has to be a town crier, okay? Some people are just kind of born into it. And the reason why I'm sharing this with you, because it can alleviate a lot of stress in your life. A lot of stress. And find people that you can share points of view with. Find people that you can share information with. And guard the sanctity of your inner flame with vigilance. This is an important time because life goes on. People have jobs. They have careers. They have some hopes. They have some dreams. They have some aspirations. And we're in the thick of things right now. So it's really important that you're able to be in this world and not of it. And it's clearly one of the most difficult things to do. But if you can manage that, then you'll be able to deal with whatever's coming in a more kind of rational, clear-headed, non-panic state. We don't want to inflame the panic. We just don't. So take yourself off the hook if you think you need to share everything with everybody. You don't have to. And that's part of another version of self-care. Okay? Doesn't mean you're sticking your head in the sand, right? But be selective. If you want to explore these things, be selective. Don't let your light get snuffed out. All right. This is Robert Phoenix. You've been listening to 15 Minutes of Flame. You know the drill. Use your head to discern what's real. Your heart to stable when it's possible.